They say age brings wisdom, but it also brings silence, the kind that wraps around your voice when no one in the room wants to hear it. I sat at the head of the table I built, every inch of that home forged from my sacrifices, and yet I was invisible. My children, my grandchildren, they spoke of my legacy as if I were already buried beneath it. But legacies aren't built on gold and land. They're built on memories, secrets, and sometimes vengeance. That day, under the chandelier I once cleaned with trembling hands, they planned to strip me of everything. But they forgot one thing: I was listening. And I remembered everything. My name is Eleanor Bryce, 78 years old, widow, mother, grandmother, and apparently, to some, just a relic that refuses to fall apart. They called it the Willow House, a grand old manor nestled beneath a towering weeping willow that had stood longer than any of us. The branches dipped low, like arms bent in sorrow, as though the tree itself had seen too much and wanted to forget. I often sat beneath it in the evenings, listening to the wind hum through its leaves while the rest of the house buzzed with conversations I was no longer a part of. For 43 years, I ruled this house, not with an iron fist, but with hands that built, cooked, cleaned, healed, and comforted. When Martin, my husband, passed 5 years ago, I thought I'd be left to grieve in peace. Instead, a new hierarchy formed. My son Nathan moved back in to help me manage the estate, but it was his wife, Vanessa, who truly took the reins. Vanessa Bryce. Poised, polished, and venom wrapped in velvet. She walked through my halls like she owned them. She rearranged the dining room, changed the curtains I'd hand-stitched, threw out heirlooms under the guise of modernization. She smiled through it all, always that smile, as fake as the pearls around her neck. She'd lean close at family gatherings, place her hand on my shoulder, and speak sweetly. But her words were daggers. "Oh, Mother Eleanor, wouldn't you be more comfortable in the guest wing? It's so much quieter there. Perhaps we should discuss power of attorney, just in case something happens. You know how delicate things can get at your age." Nathan never defended me. He sat beside her, nodding like a man who'd forgotten the woman who held his feverish hand through childhood nights and scraped together enough money for his college tuition when Martin's business faltered. I knew what they were doing. The subtle isolation. The whispered conversations behind doors. The accidental deletions of my email accounts and misdirected letters. Vanessa wanted this house. This legacy. She wanted to wear the crown I never asked for. And they thought I'd go quietly. But what Vanessa didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had secrets. I had a diary filled with truths. I had friends who owed me favors. And most importantly, I had nothing left to lose. It all began the night of the estate dinner. The one Vanessa organized in my honor. A lavish affair with crystal glasses, a catered menu, and a guest list that included lawyers, bankers, and socialites I'd never met. Just a small celebration of everything you've built, she said with her saccharine voice and painted-on smile. But I saw the guest of honor wasn't me, it was the transition of power. A silent, strategic coup. And that night, beneath the glint of the chandelier I'd watched being installed 30 years ago, Vanessa made her move. What she didn't realize was, I was already one step ahead. I dressed myself for the dinner. No one offered to help, not that I would have accepted. I chose the navy blue silk dress Martin once said made me look like a queen among paupers. It no longer hugged the way it once had, but it held dignity in every stitch. I pinned my hair up myself, trembling hands defying the years, and fastened the brooch my mother gave me on her deathbed, a silver locket that hadn't been opened in decades. The house was glowing when I emerged. Vanessa had hired an event company, decorated the grand hall with florals too exotic for our soil, changed out the drapes for something sheer and expensive. It was a show, and she played the perfect hostess. She greeted guests at the door with champagne and performed laughter like it was a script. The staff scurried under her direction. My staff. She made a spectacle of pretending to include me. "Oh, Eleanor, doesn't the room look just divine? She took my arm, gentle enough for the cameras. "You must be so proud." I smiled. "Just a faint one." "I am. Proud of how easily you learned to replace me." She laughed, pretending I was joking. I recognized the lawyer near the fireplace. Jacob Linfield, Martin's old associate. His presence told me what I'd suspected. Vanessa wasn't waiting for anyone to die. She was orchestrating a live burial, with me as the main exhibit. The evening went on in polished harmony. Small talk, toasts, mentions of legacy and leadership. Vanessa even arranged for a projector slideshow of the Bryce family journey, carefully edited to include her in almost every pivotal scene, even ones she hadn't lived through. I watched it like a stranger. My name was said with reverence, but my role was that of a fading memory. Nathan took the floor to deliver a toast. My son, once the boy who carved initials into the willow tree and brought me daisies with roots still attached. Now a man wearing cufflinks and conviction. "We're here to honor my mother's legacy," he began. "She's built more than a home, she's built a foundation. And now, as we look toward the future, we want to ensure that foundation is preserved." I saw it coming. Vanessa stood beside him. Her eyes glinted. Nathan continued, "That's why, after long consideration, we've decided to form the Bryce Heritage Trust. My mother will remain as honorary chair, of course, but the day-to-day control will pass to a younger generation, myself and Vanessa." Applause followed. So loud, so eager. Champagne glasses clinked. Smiles everywhere. But I wasn't clapping. I remained seated, my hands folded neatly in my lap. And then, Vanessa, dear, elegant Vanessa, turned to me with that smile. "We hope this gives you more time to rest, Eleanor. You've earned peace." I looked around the room. All eyes on me, expecting a gracious smile, a quiet nod, a surrender. I rose. Slowly. "My peace," I said, voice clear and unshaking, "will not come from being silenced." A hush fell. Vanessa's smile twitched. "Thank you all for coming," I continued. "This evening has been enlightening. And while I appreciate the gesture of this trust, I think it's time I reminded everyone exactly whose name is on the deed of this house." Gasps. Murmurs. Vanessa blinked rapidly. Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came. "And if you truly wanted to honor me," I added, "you would have asked, not plotted." I turned toward the main hallway, heels echoing against the marble. But just before I left, I paused at the grand portrait of Martin and me, the one that hung above the staircase. I placed my hand on the frame. "You built your plans on my silence. But I am done being quiet." And with that, I walked away from their applause, their champagne, and their betrayal, towards something they didn't expect. War. The silence that followed my departure from the dining hall wasn't just awkward, it was loaded. 100 whispered questions lingered behind me, but I didn't look back. I walked with purpose to the library, a place that had always been mine. Vanessa never dared change this room. She couldn't. It was filled with Martin's old books, my journals, and secrets tucked in the pages like bookmarks from another life. I shut the door behind me and locked it. My knees ached as I knelt before the fireplace and slid my hand behind the lowest brick. There, exactly where I left it, was the faded green notebook. Leather-bound, soft with age. My handwriting sharp, slanted, defiant, filled every page. This was my insurance, my testimony, my war chest. Every betrayal, every backdoor meeting I overheard, every sly remark Vanessa whispered when she thought I was asleep, documented. I wrote it all down, just like my mother once told me to. "When they take your voice, Eleanor, let your pen speak louder." I pulled it close and sat at Martin's old desk, flipping through the entries. There was one in particular I needed. The one about the real estate transaction Vanessa tried to hide. There it was. February 18th, overheard Vanessa speaking with a broker named Jeffers. "She's attempting to sell the East Field under a Shell LLC, Hollow Ridge Holdings. Nathan doesn't know. Claims proceeds are for liquid assets, but I tracked the account. Offshore. Cayman. I had the paper trail. I had a friend who still worked at the bank who owed me a favor. And I had a grandson, young Oliver, who always thought the world of me. He was studying law, curious, eager, and not yet under Vanessa's influence. I called him. "Grandma," he answered, surprised. "Everything okay? I need you to come over. Now. And bring a copy scanner." He didn't question me. Good boy. By the time Oliver arrived through the back entrance, I had already laid out the notebook pages I needed, Martin's original property deeds, and 2 notarized letters, one from Martin giving me full authority over all family trusts, and another from a long-dead partner stating my role in the original inheritance fund Vanessa pretended didn't exist. "Whoa," Oliver said, scanning the documents. "What is all this?" "Evidence," I replied. "Your dear Aunt Vanessa is about to find out what happens when you try to bury a woman who's already dug your grave." He blinked, caught between awe and concern. "Is this legal?" "Every word," I said, sliding a USB stick across the desk. "Copy everything. We're going to prepare an affidavit. I want a copy sent to the family lawyer, to the press, and to a judge I once babysat as a girl." "Grandma, what are you planning?" I looked at him not just as my grandson, but as the boy who once cried when I read To Kill a Mockingbird aloud and asked if justice always came too late. "Retribution, darling," I said. "The kind they never saw coming." He copied, scanned, and emailed. I gave him instructions, calm and clinical. Vanessa had thrown her stone, but I had boulders lined up, legal ones, personal ones, even emotional landmines she hadn't dreamed I remembered. As Oliver left that night, he turned to me at the door. "You're not scared, are you?" I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in years. "No," I said, because unlike Vanessa, I'm not trying to take anything that wasn't mine to begin with. But Vanessa would come to learn that the most dangerous person in a house full of heirs is the one with nothing left to inherit but truth. By morning, Vanessa had crafted her usual narrative. The estate dinner was a success, she said. Eleanor's remarks? Just a touch of confusion. Fatigue, maybe. She even told the staff I needed rest and should not be disturbed. She was laying the groundwork to paint me as senile. I let her. Let the enemy believe you're wounded until it's too late to run. Vanessa strutted through the house in her silk robe that morning, barking orders and polishing her false reality. Nathan trailed behind her like a loyal hound, asking questions she answered for both of them. She'd already begun moving boxes into the East Wing, my wing. Her confidence was growing. Arrogance, really. It always blooms loudest just before the fall. What she didn't know was that Oliver had already met with 2 attorneys. We had submitted a petition for a temporary restraining order to freeze all transactions involving family properties. The offshore account? Flagged. The Holleridge Holdings transfer? Investigated. And the best part, the house deed Vanessa believed had transferred to the Heritage Trust? It had never legally changed hands. Martin never signed the final documents. He'd left it to me in full, through a last-minute amendment he never told anyone about. Not even Nathan. I had the only signed copy. It was time to water the roots of doubt. At lunch, I asked the entire family to join me in the garden, an unusual request, which made them nervous. I wore a pale gray cardigan and held a folded document in my lap. They gathered slowly, Nathan, Vanessa, my 2 grandchildren, and even Vanessa's sister and mother, who'd been living in the guest house as long-term visitors. I pointed to the rose garden. "Vanessa," I said sweetly, "didn't you say you planned to tear this up?" She blinked. "Well, yes. We were thinking a modern koi pond would be more contemporary. Clean lines. Minimalism." "These roses," I said, "were planted the year Nathan was born. Each bush was a birthday. The white one there." I pointed. That was when he turned 10. The same day he broke his arm climbing the willow. A soft silence followed. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "Mother, we're just trying to make the house more functional." I nodded. "Functional." "Yes. Then I unfolded the paper on my lap. That's why I thought this might interest you. It's the deed. The real one. The one your father updated after his stroke, leaving this house and the surrounding lands to me and me alone. Vanessa's face cracked just slightly. That can't be, I had it notarized. Filed it myself. And yesterday, it was verified by the county clerk. I stood, letting the silence stew. Which means, dear Vanessa, you've been giving away bedrooms and remodeling gardens in a house that does not belong to you. And more importantly, you've been making financial decisions on my behalf, which, as of this morning, is being reviewed for potential fraud. Vanessa's smile returned, tight and furious. You can't do this. But I already have, I replied. Nathan looked between us. Wait, what fraud? What is she talking about? She knows about the East Field, I said, never breaking eye contact with Vanessa. And Hollow Ridge Holdings. Color drained from Vanessa's face. Oliver. I called over my shoulder. My grandson stepped forward, phone in hand. I've just forwarded the full report to Uncle Nathan and our lawyer. And Grandma asked me to prepare copies for everyone here. Vanessa turned to Nathan, desperate. She's manipulating this. Don't listen to her. She's old. She's confused. I'm not confused, I said. I've simply decided to stop playing dead while you write my eulogy. Nathan stepped back. Is this true? He asked her, quieter now. The offshore accounts? She hesitated. A fatal mistake. I did what I had to do for us, Nathan. Your mother, she's stuck in the past. And you're trying to erase it, I said. Brick by brick. She exploded then, voice sharp, high-pitched. You've always hated me. Ever since I married into this family, you've treated me like an outsider. No, I replied softly. I treated you like someone who didn't understand what it meant to belong to something greater than herself. Now I see. You never wanted to belong. You wanted to own. Silence. Only the wind stirred the rose bushes. And then I walked away, leaving her standing in the very garden she planned to destroy, surrounded by the thorns she thought she'd buried me beneath. The house had a memory. It remembered the echoes of laughter, of lullabies I hummed down the halls, of Martin's low voice reading business reports late into the night. It remembered my children's footsteps, the creak of the staircase that only gave way under guilt. And now it remembered silence, unsettled, watchful silence. After the confrontation in the garden, Vanessa's movements grew jittery. She no longer swept through rooms with that regal confidence. She lingered by closed doors, listened at corners. I noticed how she avoided the East Wing entirely, as if the old portraits might whisper the truth out loud. Nathan barely spoke. I saw the storm behind his eyes, the quiet war between a son and a husband, between loyalty to his wife and the growing horror that he might have let her destroy the very foundation of his bloodline. It would have been easy to gloat, but I didn't. I simply moved through the halls with quiet dignity, reclaiming what they had tried to make me forget was mine. The staff resumed answering to me. My name was no longer whispered in the past tense. I was Eleanor Bryce again, not the burden Vanessa painted me as, not the old relic tucked into the shadows. But I wasn't finished. Because Vanessa hadn't left. She stayed, fought in subtler ways. Late that week, I noticed my phone stopped ringing. My mail disappeared. Oliver texted me that the firm hadn't received the second affidavit we'd sent. When I confronted the courier, I learned it had been signed for by someone named V. Bryce. Sabotage. Old school, paper trail sabotage. I didn't confront her. I gave her space to hang herself higher. Instead, I called a meeting. Not in the formal dining room, not in the library. In the Willow room, the glass-walled sunroom facing the ancient tree, the one place Vanessa hated. Too cold, she'd once said. Too haunted. I invited Nathan, the grandchildren, Vanessa's mother and sister, and a few longtime staff members who'd witnessed more than Vanessa realized. Vanessa arrived last, dressed in cream as always, hiding behind perfection. I hope this isn't another ambush, she said coolly, settling into a chair. No, I replied. This is a revelation. I stood before the windows, the great willow looming behind me like a silent witness. And then I pulled out the last card I had saved. A recording. I pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the room. I don't care what she thinks she owns. Once we transfer the titles, she'll be too senile to know what we did. Old people forget. That's the beauty of it. Gasps. Her voice unmistakable. Confident. Cruel. And if she pushes back, we'll just move her to that clinic near Ashwood. I already spoke to the administrator, told him she's been confused. We'll say it's for her safety. I paused the tape. Vanessa shot up. That's illegal. How did you get that? The walls remember, dear, I said. As do the cameras you didn't know I had installed after Martin passed. Her face paled. Her mother buried her face in her hands. Nathan looked stunned, gutted. You plan to put her in a home? Don't act like she's innocent. Vanessa snapped. She's manipulative. She's trying to turn everyone against me. No, I said, voice low. I simply reminded them who you really are. I turned to Nathan. The house is yours someday, Nathan. But only when I'm gone. Not exiled. Not erased. Gone. And until that day, you will treat me not as a guest in my own life, but as the matriarch of this family. He said nothing, but his silence was no longer complicit. It was ashamed. Vanessa looked around, no allies left, no defense to mount. I stepped closer to her. You wanted to inherit an empire, Vanessa, I whispered. But you forgot empires are not built by tearing down their queens. They're built by earning their trust. She left the next morning. Took her mother and sister with her. Didn't say goodbye. Nathan stayed, quiet and hollow. And I made tea and returned to my garden where the willow bowed gently in the wind, as if it, too, had waited for this day. The day Vanessa left, the house exhaled. The air felt lighter. No more hurried footsteps in the hallways, no more whispered commands to the staff, no more perfume lingering like arrogance in bloom. Her exit wasn't dramatic. She didn't shout, didn't cry. She packed her designer luggage and walked out with the quiet rage of someone who still believed she'd been wronged. Nathan helped load her things into the car. I watched from the drawing room window, sipping my chamomile. He didn't look back once. For the first time in years, the Willow House was still. But peace, I knew, was never permanent in families like ours. That afternoon, Nathan knocked on my door. Come in, I said. He looked tired, older than he had just a week ago. The lines on his face were no longer from smiling. He took a seat across from me and said nothing for a long while. I didn't know, he finally said. About the clinic. The account. Any of it. I believe you, I replied. But that doesn't absolve you. He nodded. No, it doesn't. There was no anger in my voice. Only truth. You stood by her, Nathan. Not just out of love, but convenience. You let her turn me into a burden. He swallowed hard. I didn't mean to, but you did. Silence again. Then he asked the one question I had waited years to hear. Why didn't you stop her sooner? I smiled faintly. Because I wanted to see how far she'd go. And because some lessons must be taught with silence until they echo loud enough to be heard. He lowered his head. I've been a coward. You've been a son trying to keep peace between a mother and a wife. That's not cowardice. That's just being torn. But what you do next, that determines what kind of man you truly are. He left soon after, promising change, but I didn't need promises. I needed time. And for once, time was on my side. The staff returned to their rhythm. Oliver visited more frequently. He'd even begun documenting the full story of what happened for legal records, though I suspected he also wanted to preserve it as a lesson. He asked if he could interview me one day, record my voice. Not for evidence, he said, for history. Let's wait, I told him. The story's not over. Because I knew Vanessa. She wasn't the kind of woman to disappear quietly. She'd wait, repackage herself, maybe try again from a distance. Perhaps through influence. Perhaps through Nathan. But now I had allies. Now I had strength. Now I had myself. And most importantly, I had already won. Not because I exposed her. Not because I saved the house. But because I made her reveal the truth. She wanted my throne, but I reminded her it wasn't hers to inherit. It was mine to bequeath. And I hadn't chosen an heir. Not yet. The weeks that followed felt like spring after a long winter, not vibrant, but alive in a quieter way. My days resumed with the small rituals that had always anchored me: morning tea by the east window, pruning the roses just before the sun climbed too high, and rereading the letters Martin had written me over the years, tucked inside a silk box I kept locked beside my bed. But beneath the calm, a question grew louder by the day. Who would I entrust with this house, this legacy, when I was gone? Nathan had faltered. He'd watched his wife nearly erase me and only acted when the storm broke. I didn't hate him for it, but I no longer believed he could protect what I'd built. Not truly. Not without being led. Vanessa was gone, but I knew her reach could still slither back if the wrong hands held the reins. I had no illusions. If I passed today without naming a successor, the legal squabbles would rip Willow House apart. And so I turned to the one person who had acted without hesitation. Who had stood beside me not out of duty, but loyalty. My grandson, Oliver. He came one Saturday morning, fresh off a train from the city, tie loose around his neck and a legal briefcase slung over one shoulder. He always greeted me the same way, a kiss on the cheek, followed by, "Ready for war or tea, Grandma?" "Tea today," I said. "But we'll talk about war after." We sat beneath the willow, its long branches whispering around us like curtains of memory. I poured him a cup, my hands steadier now than they'd been in years. "I'm adding your name to the title," I said plainly. "A joint tenancy. Upon my death, full rights pass to you." He nearly choked on the sip he'd taken. "Wait, what?" "You're giving me the estate." "I'm giving you stewardship." "You'll protect this place, not possess it." That's the difference Vanessa never understood. He set the cup down gently. "Are you sure?" "Nathan will understand," I interrupted. "Or he won't. But I'm not making this decision out of spite. I'm making it because you earned it." He said nothing for a long while, processing. Then he looked at me and asked softly, "Why now?" I looked around at the house, the garden, the willow, and finally at him. "Because the storm has passed, and now we plant anew." He nodded, humbled in a way Vanessa never could be. Later that day, we visited the family lawyer together. I brought all the documents, deeds, affidavits, even Vanessa's recorded threats. I left nothing to interpretation. The transition would be clean, ironclad. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, I returned to the garden. The wind stirred the roses. I bent down, gloves in hand, and planted a new bush beside the others. A deep red one. For the battle fought. For the queen who stayed. And for the heir who watched and learned. The red rose bush took root quicker than I expected. By the end of the week, the first bloom opened, a deep, velvet blossom that bowed gently in the wind, as if acknowledging the others. I named it Grace, though I never told anyone. Some things are mine alone. There was still unfinished business. Not with the house, or the law, or even Vanessa, but with myself. I sat one afternoon in the parlor, the one room untouched by all of Vanessa's tasteless renovations, and opened my writing desk. The scent of old ink and cedar wafted out as I drew a fresh sheet of stationery. My hand hovered over it a moment before I began to write. "Dear Vanessa, I do not expect you to read this. I don't even expect you to care. But I am writing it anyway, because I believe words matter, even when they fall on deaf ears. I want you to know I did not hate you. I pitied you. You came into this family seeking control, not connection. You measured power in square footage and signatures, and you mistook my silence for surrender. But I was never silent out of weakness. I was waiting for the right moment, for the moment you revealed yourself. You lost not because I beat you. You lost because you never understood what you were fighting for. This house was never just property. It was history, memory, sacrifice. It was love, built brick by a man who adored his family and a woman who never stopped protecting it. I hope someday you look back and realize what you could have been if you had chosen family over conquest. I won't send this letter. It's not for you. It's for me. Eleanor, I folded the letter and tucked it inside the drawer, beside Martin's old fountain pen and a photograph of us on the day we moved into Willow House. We looked so young, so full of belief in the future. That night, I slept better than I had in years. And in my dreams, the house was filled again with warmth, not the artificial glow of chandeliers and staged dinners, but real warmth. Laughter. Children running through the halls. The scent of cinnamon and rain. The sound of the piano in the drawing room. A home again. And I knew then that I'd done the right thing. Not just in saving the house, but in choosing who would inherit its soul. The first official letter came 3 weeks after Vanessa's departure. A terse envelope addressed to Mrs. Eleanor Bryce in perfectly printed type, as if civility might undo disgrace. Inside was a legal motion. Petition to review mental competency and will amendment. She wasn't done after all. Despite the evidence. Despite the recordings. Despite being cast out from the estate with her lies exposed, Vanessa had filed a petition in court claiming I had been coerced by Oliver into rewriting the deed and that I was no longer of sound mind to oversee the estate. She wanted a hearing. She wanted a spectacle. And in doing so, she made her final mistake. She gave me a stage. I called Oliver immediately. His tone was calm, but underneath it, a thread of righteous anger vibrated. "She's going to regret this," he said. No, I told him, steady as ever. She's going to learn from this. We gathered everything. Statements from the staff. Affidavits from the attorney who witnessed the new deed. A doctor's letter affirming my mental fitness just 2 months prior, an annual checkup I'd insisted on, even before all this began. I had been preparing for a war I knew might last longer than one dinner party. The court date was set. The morning of the hearing, I dressed not in something dark or somber, but in soft lavender. Martin always said it made my eyes look like storm clouds on the edge of clearing. Oliver picked me up in his car. As we pulled up to the courthouse, the press was already gathered. Vanessa wanted a scene, and so she would get one. In the courtroom, she sat poised, every hair in place, flanked by her expensive new lawyer. Nathan was absent. Perhaps that was mercy. Or shame. The judge was an older woman. I remembered her from years ago, a girl I once taught Sunday school to, long before she wore robes and ruled with gavels. Her eyes softened when she saw me, but her tone remained professional. The proceedings began. Vanessa's attorney argued I had been unduly influenced, that I was emotionally unstable, that recent events proved a diminished capacity to make complex legal decisions. She even had the audacity to suggest I'd fabricated the recording used against her. And then I took the stand. I did not raise my voice. I did not plead. I simply told the truth. I am old, I began. But I am not broken. I am not confused. And I am not ashamed. I laid out the betrayal, the hidden accounts, the recorded conversations, the clinic arrangements. I presented letters, statements, journal entries going back months. I answered every question with clarity and poise. Then I ended with this. What Vanessa fails to understand is that power does not come from paper. It comes from memory, from consistency, from witness. And I have been a witness to every corner of that house, its love, its loss, its rot, and its bloom. The judge ruled in less than 10 minutes. Case dismissed. Full ownership affirmed. Legal sanctions to be considered. Vanessa left the courtroom before the gavel even finished falling. Her heels clicked furiously against marble. I didn't turn to look at her. I didn't need to, because I had already erased her name from the future of the Willow House and carved a new one in its place. Autumn came slowly. The leaves turned gold one by one, not in bursts, but in quiet succession, as if the world itself was learning the rhythm of peace again. The willow shed its long fingers, one at a time, carpeting the garden in a soft quilt of amber and olive. The war was over. Vanessa had vanished from public life. Rumors said she moved out of state. Others claimed she was trying to worm her way into another wealthy family, one less fortified, perhaps. But I didn't care. I never inquired. The moment she stepped out of Willow House, her chapter ended. And I refused to let her take another page. Nathan remained, though he kept to himself more than before. He'd started volunteering at the local shelter, perhaps seeking redemption. We spoke occasionally less as mother and son, more as two people slowly relearning how to trust one another. I didn't rush it. Some wounds needed to be aired before they could be healed. But Oliver bloomed. He took to his new responsibilities with quiet grace. He didn't boast. He didn't decorate the halls with his name. He simply showed up every day. He met with the staff, studied the land reports, asked me questions no one had ever cared enough to ask. And he listened. He asked about the crack tile in the pantry Martin refused to fix. About the letter I once received from my sister during the war. About the hand-sewn cushion in the attic made from my mother's wedding gown. He understood that Willow House wasn't just property, it was a story. One that needed a custodian, not a conqueror. One crisp morning, he found me in the garden again, beneath the willow. He sat beside me, wordless at first. Then he handed me a small, leather-bound book. "What's this?" I asked. "I wrote it," he said. "Your story. Everything that happened. From your words, from the files, from the letters. I'm going to donate a copy to the Historical Society. But this one's just for you." I turned the pages. The willow wept last. He'd written every word like a tribute, not a biography. Not about scandal or courts or titles. But about strength. Survival. The reclamation of voice. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day I first stepped into Willow House, a young bride full of dreams. Legacy. Not a thing to defend, but a truth to pass on. The wind stirred above us, rustling through the branches. The tree stood tall, unchanged, as if marking time itself. It had watched me as a wife, as a mother, as a ghost in my own home, and now as the victor. I reached over, took Oliver's hand, and smiled. "You've done well," I whispered. "Now listen carefully." He looked at me, alert, expectant. "Someday," I said, "you'll find yourself sitting where I am. Old, watching, guarding, and someone will come for what you've built. Don't shout. Don't chase. Don't plead." "What should I do?" he asked. I looked at the tree, at the home behind us. "Remember what I did." And he nodded, because he would. Peace, like all things in this house, was layered. On the surface, it was serene, breakfasts taken in sunlight, laughter echoing again in the hallways, and Oliver's voice rising with confident warmth as he led meetings with local preservation committees. But beneath, I felt something else. Not danger, not fear, just unfinished business. I began waking in the night, not with terror, but with an uneasy stillness, like the house itself was holding its breath. The wind outside the window whispered a little too insistently. The shadows in the stairwell stretched longer than usual. And then, the letter arrived. It wasn't mailed. No stamp, no postmark. It was hand-delivered. Slid under the front door. The envelope was cream, expensive paper. The handwriting impeccably neat. To the matriarch of Willow House. Inside was a single page. I wasn't finished. "You should have known better than to think I'd go quietly. You took everything. I only want what's mine. Watch carefully. You'll see the cracks before they break." Vanessa. The house no longer belonged to her. The courts had ruled. Her plans were exposed. But her hatred, that had no jurisdiction. I handed the letter to Oliver. He read it with a darkening brow. I can have the police trace handwriting, pull footage from nearby street cameras. No, I said. She won't act with noise. She's not reckless anymore, she's vengeful. And patient. He looked at me, unsettled. What do you want to do? I stared out the window at the willow tree, its branches restless in the wind. We wait, I said. And we watch. She thinks she's still playing a game. Let's make her believe it. Oliver sighed. And if she's not bluffing, then we remind her why she lost the first time. I had the guest wing closed the morning after Vanessa's letter arrived. It wasn't just for security, it was for memory. That wing had once been reserved for visiting relatives, old friends from Martin's time in the city, and for quiet moments of solitude after the loss of my sister. But in recent years, it had become something else, Vanessa's lair. She'd claimed it as her domain, decorated it with modern art that clashed with the house's soul, and conducted her whispered schemes behind its antique doors. Now it stood empty. Or so I thought. That morning, I passed the end of the corridor and caught a scent that hadn't lingered since Vanessa's departure, rosewood perfume. The kind she always dabbed behind each ear. Subtle. Intentional. A signature. I stopped walking. The air shifted. The room at the very end, the one she always kept locked, was cracked open. I hadn't opened it. Oliver hadn't either. I stepped inside. The room was pristine. Almost too pristine. The bed was made, the curtains drawn open, sunlight pooling in a golden square across the parquet floor. But the writing desk had a single item on it, a feather. Crow feather. Black, sleek, placed deliberately. I closed the door slowly and locked it. Oliver was in the study, reading over land documents when I found him. She's been in the house, I said. He stood at once. When? Last night or early morning. The perfume. The desk. A feather on the desk in her old room. His face tensed. She's not bluffing anymore. No, I said, she's taunting. We checked the security system, nothing. No alerts. No camera footage. The front and back doors were secure, but the side cellar entrance, the one behind the stone wall, it hadn't been sealed in years. She used the old passage, Oliver said. It's not on the electrical grid. No sensors. No lights. She knows this house better than I thought, I replied. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of fear. Out of calculation. Vanessa wanted me to see the feather. Wanted me to feel her presence in the bones of the house. It was an invitation, a sick, twisted olive branch. She was saying, I'm still here. So I wrote her a note of my own, not on stationery, on parchment. The kind I used when sending old family correspondence. I wrote it in my own hand, slow and sharp. You are no longer part of this house. But if you insist on haunting it, just remember, ghosts do not choose who exorcises them. I placed the note under her old pillow, locked the room again, and waited, because the hunt had begun. Vanessa had underestimated one thing. I knew the house better than she did. She may have memorized its blueprints and legal documents, but I had cleaned its corners, touched its beams, listened to its secrets in the quiet hours before dawn. Willow House didn't belong to her. It had never welcomed her. So when she tried to haunt it, I let the house answer back. The morning after I left the note under her pillow, I returned to that room. The feather was gone, and in its place, taped neatly to the mirror, was another letter. I don't need to own the house, Eleanor. I just need to make you doubt it's still yours. Let's see how strong your memory really is. Underneath was a photograph. It was an old family photo, one that had gone missing years ago. Me, Martin, Nathan as a toddler. But in this photo, someone had drawn a black X across my face in thick marker. I stared at it calmly. She's testing us, I said aloud, placing the photo on the fireplace mantel. She thinks this is about control. Oliver and I sat down that evening in the library to plan. The feather, the perfume, the letter, these weren't random. Vanessa was marking territory, but not for possession, for revenge. She's daring us to react emotionally, Oliver said. Exactly, I nodded. Which is why we respond logically. We went room by room, identifying every unmonitored passage, every crawl space, every servant corridor. Oliver installed new sensors, hidden ones, not visible on the standard grid. He hired a discreet security team to patrol the grounds, dressed as groundskeepers. And he placed one camera, just one, directly inside the guest wing. If Vanessa returned, we would know. And if she tried to enter again, she'd find something else waiting. Because while Oliver secured the exterior, I did what I had always done best. I set the trap from inside. I took down her photo, replaced it with an identical copy, but embedded with a dye packet. The moment someone tried to remove it, the ink would stain their fingers blue-black for 2 days. I sprinkled powdered sugar just beneath the floor rug inside the room, an old trick. Any movement would disturb the layer, leaving footprints invisible to the naked eye but clear to my eye. And finally, I placed a sealed envelope addressed to Miss V. Bryce inside her old wardrobe. A test. If she took it, I'd know. If she opened it, I'd know. It was empty, of course. But the flap was laced with a harmless, odorless chemical that glowed faintly under black light. Vanessa wanted to provoke paranoia. She didn't realize she was playing chess with a woman who had been born into strategy. I waited that night beside the fireplace, the photo back on the mantel, the lights dimmed low. And just before midnight, the floor creaked in the guest wing. Lightly, deliberately. Then silence. The house had spoken. And the trap had begun to close. Morning came quietly. The sunlight filtered into the hall in narrow gold shafts, touching the old paintings and worn banisters like a gentle reminder. Even shadows must face the dawn. I rose earlier than usual and made my way straight to the guest wing. The powdered sugar on the rug was scattered, just slightly. The faintest smudge of footprints trailed from the door to the wardrobe. The picture on the mantel had been disturbed, its corner curled upward. And most telling of all, the sealed envelope I had left in the wardrobe? Gone. I didn't smile. I simply nodded. She'd taken the bait. By the time Oliver came downstairs, I already had a plan. We need to check her, I said. She won't come back right away, he replied, pouring coffee. Not unless she's desperate. She is desperate, I said. And if I know Vanessa, she won't wait long to gloat. That afternoon, I hosted a luncheon in the garden, an open invitation to all our old neighbors, family acquaintances, local trustees. I even had invitations sent to the Preservation Society. I made sure one went to Vanessa's old friend, Carla Jennings. Carla arrived fashionably late, as always her sunglasses large, her opinions larger. And trailing behind her, a few paces behind the crowd, was a woman in a black coat, a wide-brimmed hat, and gloves. Gloves in autumn. She stayed at the edge of the gathering, pretending to admire the roses. She kept her face low, away from direct contact, but I could see the edges of her jaw. I'd memorized that shape years ago. Vanessa. And then there it was. The glove slipped slightly as she reached for a wine glass. Her hand, partially visible, stained blue-black. The dye had worked. I walked toward her slowly, purposefully, holding a tray of lemon tarts like I hadn't a care in the world. "Do you like the garden?" I asked. She didn't respond, just nodded without turning. Funny, I continued, the red rose there bloomed later than expected. Some things take longer to grow roots. But once they do, they're impossible to pull out. She flinched slightly. I smiled. "And your gloves," I said casually. Quite bold for the season. Unless, of course, you're hiding something. She turned just enough for our eyes to meet. A flicker of rage flashed behind her pupils, sharp, electric, bitter. Then she backed away, disappearing into the crowd before I could say another word. Oliver joined me seconds later. "We saw her," he said, holding up his phone. "Security team caught her on 3 angles. She won't be able to deny it." "Good," I said. "It's time we end this." That evening, I penned a final notice. A cease and desist letter. It detailed every intrusion, every threat, every trace of evidence, and declared any further trespassing as criminal. We had it hand-delivered to Vanessa's registered temporary residence, an apartment under a false name, 2 towns over. We knew she'd read it. The next morning, a new note appeared on the front gate. "You may have the house, Eleanor, but I promise, one day, you'll wonder who's really inside it. V." I handed the note to Oliver and looked toward the willow. "Let her keep writing," I said. "Because eventually, all ghosts get tired of haunting. And when they do," Oliver finished the thought for me, "we bury them properly." I had a dream that night. In it, the willow outside the house had grown so tall its branches scraped the roof, and beneath it stood Vanessa, arms outstretched, as if calling something up from the earth. But nothing rose. The soil stayed still. She screamed in silence, and the wind carried her voice away like dust. I woke with a chill in my bones and a sense that something was ending or about to. I dressed before dawn, wrapped myself in Martin's old cardigan, and walked the halls alone. The early light bathed the corridor in copper and gold, and for a moment, it felt like the house exhaled, still, warm, alert. In the study, I found Oliver already awake, poring over a collection of old estate ledgers. "What are you looking for?" I asked. He turned the book toward me. It was dated 1967, the year Martin and I first moved into Willow House. "I thought it might help to track who had keys over the years," he said, "in case we miss someone." I took the book from him. The spine cracked with age, the pages thin as tissue. Near the middle, I found something I had forgotten, a handwritten log from Martin. A list of every person we'd ever trusted with keys to the house. Maids, gardeners, family, and at the bottom, a name circled twice. Esther Langley. Key permanently retained. Trusted with all private entrances. Esther had been my friend, my closest confidant, a quiet woman who had once worked as a private nurse. She left abruptly 20 years ago after her husband died. I never knew why. She and I had lost touch. And then I remembered Esther was Vanessa's godmother. I stood slowly, the blood draining from my face. "She never returned the key," I whispered. Oliver's face tightened. "You think Vanessa found her?" "I think Vanessa used her. Maybe she even manipulated her into thinking I'd betrayed her. It would explain everything, the hidden entries, the lack of forced signs, the familiarity. Vanessa didn't just break in. She walked in. We tried contacting Esther. No answer. The number disconnected. But Oliver was persistent. Within hours, he tracked down records showing Esther had passed away just a year ago. Her belongings scattered among family. No will. No inventory. She had no children, Oliver said. Everything she owned could have been taken by anyone. That key. It's probably still out there. That meant Vanessa didn't just have memory, she had access. I summoned the locksmith by noon. We changed every lock on the property, every bolt, every code. Even the old iron cellar door behind the garden wall. It took hours. When it was done, I stood at the threshold of the main door and held the new key in my hand. Heavy, solid, cold. "From now on," I said, "only those who carry truth get to enter." Oliver nodded. And for the first time since the first letter arrived, the house felt sealed. Not imprisoned. Protected. And still, I knew we hadn't seen the last of her. Because women like Vanessa don't vanish. They wait. 3 weeks passed in near silence. No letters. No shadows. No perfume trailing through the halls. Just the sound of leaves crisping underfoot outside, and the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, steady, measured, grounding. Oliver began spending more time in the town office, overseeing the transition of property records and community development plans. I encouraged it. He needed to grow into his legacy, and part of that meant stepping beyond the gates of Willow House and earning respect in his own name. But I stayed home. I tended the roses. I took my meals in the sunroom. I reread Martin's journals by firelight, drawing comfort from his words and warnings. But I also listened to the house, to its breathing. It had grown quiet. Too quiet. Then, on a Thursday evening just after sunset, the bell rang. Not the electric chime installed years ago. The old bell. The one with the brass pull rope and the deep, resonant clang that only rang from the side door near the cellar. The entrance guests never used. I stood slowly. My cane tapped the tiles as I crossed the foyer. When I opened the door, I didn't find Vanessa. I found a girl. No older than 20, maybe younger. Pale. Windblown. In her hand was a small satchel and in her eyes, a familiar defiance. "Can I help you?" I asked. She looked down, then met my gaze. "You're Eleanor Bryce." "I am. I need to speak with you. It's about Vanessa." My fingers tightened on the doorframe. "What's your name?" "Alina," she said. "I'm her niece. I used to live with her." I let her in. She followed me to the parlor, eyes darting over the portraits, the furnishings, the artifacts of lives she had only heard about. She sat stiffly in the corner chair, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to touch the upholstery. "She's not well," she said after a long pause. I remained still. "She talks about the house constantly. Says it's still hers. Says you cheated her. That you manipulated everyone. And what do you believe?" I asked. Alina hesitated. "I don't know. I believed her. Once. But then I found this." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a leather-bound notebook. I knew it instantly. It was mine. One of the old journals I thought lost during Vanessa's early redecoration campaigns. A volume I believed had been thrown away or destroyed. I opened it. It was filled with entries, my thoughts, my plans, even notations about Vanessa's behavior in those early years. Everything. "She kept it hidden," Alina said. "I found it locked in a trunk. She told me you were cruel. But this," she motioned to the journal, "this isn't cruel. It's just truth." I closed the book gently. "Why did you bring it to me?" "Because I don't want to be her," Alina whispered. "And I think you're the only one who can stop her before she does something worse." Something worse. The words clanged in my chest. Vanessa wasn't done. She was unraveling. And now, she was dragging others with her. I stood. "Thank you, Alina. You were right to come." The girl looked up. "Will you help her?" I looked toward the window, where the willow tree stood silhouetted against the evening sky. "I'll help her," I said softly. "But not the way she wants." Alina stayed the night. I gave her the south-facing guest room, one untouched by Vanessa's presence. As I pulled the quilt up over her shoulders, I caught a glimpse of something not often seen in youth: remorse. It lived in the way she avoided my eyes, in the tension in her hands. She wasn't a spy or a pawn. She was something rarer. She was a witness who had decided to tell the truth. In the early morning hours, I sat at my desk and reopened the journal she had returned. My words from years ago stared back at me like reflections in still water. I had forgotten how plainly I had written about Vanessa's early manipulations, her slow but deliberate unraveling of the family structure. Even then, she had a gift for appearing helpful while slowly shifting power toward herself. I had documented everything, but I had never shared it. Until now. I photocopied the journal, had Oliver scan it, and filed the digital copies into secure archives. Then I wrote a letter, short, clear, absolute. To whom it may concern, this journal reflects a pattern of psychological manipulation, coercive control, and attempted financial displacement by Vanessa Bryce. Let it serve as record and warning should she ever attempt to reclaim legal footing. Eleanor Bryce. I sealed it, had it notarized, filed it with our estate lawyer. By noon, it was official. And yet, a part of me felt unsettled. Not afraid, just unfinished. That evening, I asked Alina to walk the gardens with me. We passed the red rose bush, the stone bench Martin built with his own hands, and stopped beneath the willow. "I need you to tell me something," I said. She looked nervous. "Okay." Is she planning something else? Has she said anything that sounded final? Alina's eyes flickered. She hesitated. She keeps talking about how if she can't have the house, no one will. She's angry, more than I've ever seen her. And paranoid. Keeps talking to mirrors. She thinks she hears your voice inside them. My heart thudded once, hard. I told her she needed help, Alina whispered. She threw a lamp at me. That confirmed what I already knew. Vanessa wasn't just plotting anymore, she was spiraling. Which made her unpredictable. And dangerous. That night, I walked through the house alone. I stopped at every mirror, every hallway, every place I knew she once stood. And finally, I came to the grand mirror in the drawing room, the one she'd had gilded with new trim when she believed she'd be crowned lady of the estate. I stared into it. And I spoke, softly, knowing somehow she would hear. You wanted to own a legacy, Vanessa. But all you've inherited is your own reflection. And as the candlelight flickered across the glass, I swore, just for a moment, I saw her. Not as she was now, but as she had been. Hungry, cold, alone, and still reaching. The mirror didn't shatter. It didn't moan or blink or do anything theatrical. But the air in the drawing room shifted that night. Heavy, dense, like breath held too long. I left the room slowly, not because I feared the house, never that, but because I feared the woman I might yet become if I let Vanessa's bitterness sink its teeth too deep. There's a kind of rot that spreads not through walls, but through memory, through grudge. And I had come too far to rot. The next morning, Alina came down with her suitcase. I'm going back, she said. I raised an eyebrow. To her. To check on her. To confront her. I don't want to run. And she needs to know I gave you the journal. I admired her courage. And worried for it. Don't go alone, I said. Take Oliver. Or at least let us call someone to be nearby. I have to do it this way, she insisted. She left that afternoon. I stood at the gates, watching her disappear down the curved drive, framed by the old oaks and the rust-colored light of nearing winter. That evening, I lit a fire in the hearth. The house was quiet again, dangerously so. I went through the study, the hall, the cellar doors. No disturbances. No feathers. No letters. But when I came to the drawing room, I saw it. A hairline crack in the mirror's glass. So faint I nearly missed it. No object had struck it. No pressure had bent it. But the fracture was there, like the skin of the house reacting to a wound deeper than wood and brick. I reached out, touched it. It was cold. I turned away quickly and called Oliver. Get me the address, I said. Where Vanessa's staying. Alina may be in danger. He didn't ask questions. He knew better. It took an hour. A flat outside town. Industrial. Concrete stairs, no elevator. Vanessa had gone from silk robes and vintage wine to rusted balcony rails and heavy curtains. Desperation disguised as retreat. I arrived alone. I had left Oliver behind for now. The building manager let me up. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Harder. Then slow movement. A shuffle behind the door. A soft dragging sound. Then the door opened. Alina stood there, wide-eyed. She's not well, she whispered. I stepped in. The room smelled of lavender and something faintly burned. A record player spun without music in the corner. And in the center of the living room, seated in a high-backed chair, facing a wall lined with mirrors, Vanessa. She didn't look up. Didn't blink. Didn't even speak. She just sat there, watching herself, whispering. They all live in there now, you know. The walls, the eyes, the tree. Eleanor put me there. She buried me alive. Alina took my hand. What do we do? I looked at Vanessa, hollow and haunted, her hands trembling on the chair's arms, ink-stained fingers twitching like a clock that had lost time. We don't fight her anymore, I said softly. We close the mirror. And so I did. I walked to the wall, took down every last one, turned each face to the plaster behind it. No reflection. No trap. No shadow to cling to. Vanessa sobbed once, sharp and startled, like a string had been cut. And then she was quiet. Vanessa did not resist when they came for her. The hospital sent a discreet transport van, no sirens, no uniformed attendants. Just two professionals with quiet eyes and steady hands. Alina signed the admittance forms while I waited outside in the cold. The wind had turned that day, sharp as glass against the skin, and the sky hung low with clouds that threatened early frost. Vanessa walked out of the apartment wrapped in a gray shawl. No outburst. No glare. Her eyes met mine only once. Not hate. Not even fear. Just absence. She passed me like a shadow that had forgotten its shape. They placed her gently into the vehicle and closed the door. And, just like that, she was gone. Alina stood beside me afterward, looking impossibly young. She didn't even say my name. She murmured. "She may not remember it today," I said. "But one day, when the storm inside her clears, she'll remember who tried to save her." Alina nodded, tears held tight in her lashes. She didn't cry. Not then. I offered her a place at Willow House, but she declined. "I need to start over," she said. "Away from all of it. I'll write you, though, if that's all right." "It's more than all right," I told her. "It's family." She left me with a hug, tight and trembling, and then she, too, was gone. That evening, I returned to the house alone. For the first time in months, it truly felt empty, not the kind of emptiness that brings dread, but the kind that invites restoration. Like something long choked was breathing again. I walked the halls, tried each door. Every lock held. I entered the drawing room, stood before the cracked mirror I had not yet removed. I ran my fingers along the fracture, no wider than a hairline, but meaningful. "I'll leave you up," I whispered. "So you remember." That night, the wind howled across the moors outside the estate. But the house did not groan. The windows did not tremble. The willow did not shake. The ghosts had gone quiet. And in their silence, I heard my own voice again. Weeks passed. Peace returned not in grand declarations, but in the small consistency of days unbroken. Breakfasts were warm again. Letters came in the mail bearing kind names instead of veiled threats. Oliver resumed his meetings with the Heritage Trust, and the staff walked with ease, no longer looking over their shoulders. But the house still held one more secret. It came to me in a dream, vivid, exact. The cellar. Not the main one below the kitchen where preserves were once stored, but the old one. The original root cellar built before the estate expanded. Martin had sealed it decades ago when the foundation was reinforced. We always said we'd reopen it and turn it into a wine room. We never did. In the dream, I saw it. The iron ring in the floorboard just behind the paneling in the drawing room, hidden beneath the rug Vanessa once called outdated. And beneath that, stone steps descending into darkness. I woke at dawn and went straight there. The rug had been replaced, but the paneling remained. I pulled back the corner gently. The ring was there. Untouched. Dusty. Waiting. I opened it. The smell was dry and still, not musty, more memory than mold. I descended slowly, the lantern casting long shadows on the stone. What I found was not treasure, not records or artifacts, but a chair, a simple wooden chair, and a mirror leaning against the far wall. And carved into the stone above it, one word, witness. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't need to ask who had put it there. Martin. Back in those early years, when the house still felt too large and the business too fragile, he'd confessed to needing a place to watch himself. He had believed that power only became tyranny when it wasn't observed. And so he built himself a room of reflection. A place to sit, to think, to answer to no one but his own image. And now it was mine. I sat in the chair and looked into the mirror. The crack from the upstairs reflection did not exist here. Only my face, my age, my past, my peace. I whispered aloud, am I still the matriarch? Or just the last one left standing? And the mirror, silent and unjudging, whispered nothing back. Because some answers you only find in stillness. I closed the door behind me when I left. Not sealed, not locked, just closed. Because someday, someone else might need to sit there too. And they would know, a legacy is not made by what you leave behind. It is made by what you survive. Spring returned like an apology. After the long ache of winter, the garden burst forth all at once. The roses bloomed early, white, blush, and red, the last of which had grown taller than expected, strong and reaching. Daffodils appeared where no one had planted them, and ivy crept gently along the low stone wall. Even the willow, long weeping and watchful, gave birth to new green tendrils that shimmered like threads of silk in the breeze. The house felt awake. So did I. Oliver arranged a small celebration, nothing extravagant, just a gathering of close friends and neighbors to mark the new season, and, as he said, the rebirth of Willow House. He didn't call it that out of showmanship. He said it because it was true. It had survived scandal. It had survived invasion. It had survived betrayal from within. And it had emerged, not unscarred, but unbroken. The guests wandered the gardens that afternoon with glasses of elderflower wine. Laughter rippled through the rooms again, true laughter, not rehearsed pleasantries. I stood on the front porch in a lavender shawl and watched them, one by one, passing through the world I had protected with silence, strategy, and stubborn love. It was nearing sunset when Oliver came to my side. "They asked if you'd say a few words," he said. "If you want to." I looked out across the field. Let the house speak. But he gently pressed my hand. "They want to hear you. Not just the story. The voice behind it." So I stepped up to the old iron bell and rang it once. The guests quieted. They turned toward me. And I said this: some of you know this house as a monument. A story. Some of you know it as history. But for me, it has always been something simpler. A witness. A witness to joy, to pain, to triumph and regret. It remembers every lie told within its walls and every apology whispered too late. It remembers the scent of my husband's cologne, the sound of my son's bare feet on the stairs, the silence after the last threat left these halls. And now, it remembers peace. I took a breath. I am not here to give a speech. I am here to give thanks. To those who stayed when it was hard. To those who left when it became poisonous. And to those who helped pull this house, and me, back into the light. There was no applause. Just a silence so full, it felt holy. And then the strangest thing happened. The willow bloomed. Not the early green buds of spring, but blossoms, pale white flowers along several of its lower branches. No one had seen it do that in decades. Some said it never had. It wasn't a flowering tree. And yet, there it stood. Soft, silent, alive. Someone whispered behind me, "It's the house's way of letting go." But I knew better. It wasn't letting go. It was beginning again. 2 months passed without incident. No letters under doors. No late-night creaks. No shadows slipping through the garden. Vanessa remained in care peacefully, I was told. Alina wrote once a week, updating me gently. She doesn't speak of the house anymore, one letter read. Not in anger. Not in longing. She just doesn't speak. I wondered what silence sounded like in her mind. Not as a punishment, but as a strange kind of mercy. As for me, my days settled into a rhythm. Not the slow pace of age, but a deliberate choosing of each moment. Tea by the east window, letters read at the kitchen table, walks beneath the willow. I no longer waited for something to break. I tended what had bent. Oliver grew bolder in his role. He handled estate affairs with confidence now, advising on local heritage boards, restoring parts of the grounds that had long been ignored. But he never changed the soul of the house. He let it speak. One morning, he approached me on the back terrace. "I want to show you something," he said. He handed me a box, plain oak, smooth and worn. Inside was a key. Old brass. Heavy. Familiar. "I had this made from the original," he said. The one your Martin carried. The one you once wore on a ribbon around your neck. I took it in my hand. It felt like holding a piece of breath. I thought it should be passed on formally, Oliver said. Not through legal documents. Not even through blood. Just trust. I looked at him. This boy who had become a man beside my quiet war. Then come with me, I said. We walked together to the drawing room. I opened the hidden door behind the paneling and led him down into the old root cellar, Martin's quiet place of reflection. I let him see the chair, the mirror, the stone word etched above it. Witness. I never showed anyone this, I said. Not even your grandfather after he built it. Oliver ran his fingers along the stone. What is it? A promise, I answered, that whoever holds the house must never forget what it cost to keep it, and must never let it cost so much again. He nodded slowly. Then I placed the key in his hand. Not as a ceremony, as a truth. It's yours now, I said. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. We both knew what it meant. Not ownership. Not legacy. Responsibility. The day after I gave Oliver the key, I began writing letters. Not to the dead. To the living. I wrote one to Nathan. Not bitter, not cold. Just honest. You stood behind silence too long, my son. But you stepped forward in time. That counts for something. Maybe everything. I forgive you not because you've earned it, but because I need to be free of the burden. I hope you use what time you have left with more courage than you used in the past. That's the only inheritance I ask you to protect. I wrote one to Alina. You did what even I couldn't. You faced Vanessa while still loving her. That takes a different kind of bravery, one I didn't know I had. You are not defined by her, nor by me. You are free to build a life without echoes. And if ever you need to return, you have a place beneath the willow. I wrote one to the staff. You saw more than I ever asked you to admit. You stayed when it was easier to go. You protected the house's dignity when others only sought its value. I see you now as I always should have. Thank you. And finally, I wrote one to myself. I folded it gently, sealed it with wax, and placed it in the bottom drawer of the old vanity in my bedroom. You survived. You lost and won and lost again. But more than anything, you outlasted every storm. Your silence was not weakness. It was strategy. And when you chose to speak, you did so with clarity and purpose. Forgive yourself now. Rest. Let joy in through the windows you once boarded up. It is safe now. That night, I placed a small vase of violets beside Martin's picture. Then I went to the willow. Its blossoms had faded, but the leaves were still full, its branches swaying with a rhythm that felt like breath. I sat on the old bench beneath it, the one I hadn't touched in years, and watched the stars appear between its limbs. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I had to guard anything. I just existed. In peace. In presence. In the quiet bloom of something that had no name, because naming it would limit it. But if I had to try, I would call it freedom. I found it while cleaning the attic, a box sealed with twine, its lid dusted with time and the scent of cedar. Inside were ledgers, not of the estate, not of finances or staff, personal ones, Martin's. I hadn't seen them since he passed. He used to write in them late at night, in that same armchair I still kept in the drawing room. I thought he burned them, or perhaps simply tucked them away where even he forgot. I sat in the attic with the box on my lap, and opened the first one. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, upright, deliberate. He had recorded everything. Not just numbers or schedules, but thoughts, fears, regrets. October 1972, Eleanor has stopped singing. I think I miss it more than she knows. February 1981, Vanessa is clever. Too clever. She'll either change the family forever or burn it down trying. I worry Eleanor sees only the surface. July 1989, if anything ever happens to me, I hope this house remembers her. I hope it shields her when I cannot. I think it will. I built it to. I wept then. Not out of grief, but out of an overwhelming sense of being seen. Across time, across death. He had been watching me, understanding me, even in silence. The final entry was dated just months before his passing. She thinks she'll be alone when I go, but she won't. The house is hers, the soul of it, the memory of it. And I've left pieces of myself inside its walls, not to haunt her, but to hold her. She'll survive. She always does. I placed the ledger back in the box, carried it down, put it on the shelf in the root cellar beside the mirror and the word etched above it. Witness. Martin had been mine. And now, through those pages, I was his. The circle had closed, not with vengeance, not even with justice, but with understanding. The kind that only comes when time no longer threatens to run out, and you're free to look backward not in bitterness, but in clarity. That night, I placed my cane by the bed and did something I hadn't done in years. I left the window open, let the wind in, and slept like someone who had finally laid every burden down. Spring gave way to summer quietly. The days lengthened, the shadows softened, and the rooms of the house filled with golden light that no longer needed to defend itself. Oliver held weekly gatherings now, quiet affairs of local historians, preservationists, and neighbors who once kept a polite distance, but now crossed the threshold with familiarity. The house no longer frightened anyone. Its past had been unearthed, named, and left at peace. But time has its own clock, and mine was winding down. I felt it in my joints, yes, but also in the gentler things, the way tea no longer needed sugar to taste sweet, how the birdsong seemed closer in the morning, how my sleep grew heavier, not from exhaustion, but from readiness. I made my final arrangements without ceremony. The will was in order, the property secured, but there was one thing left, the bench beneath the willow. I asked Oliver to meet me there at sunset. The sky was painted in soft reds and deepening indigos, the tree above us casting long shadows that moved with the breeze. I handed him a small velvet pouch. He opened it slowly. Inside was a gold ring, plain, unadorned, heavy with wear. My wedding band, I said. Martin wanted it buried. I want it planted. He blinked. Planted? Beneath the rose bush. The red one. Let it root itself in something living. He didn't argue. He never did when the request came from my heart. I'm not afraid, I told him. I know, he said quietly, but I am. I reached over, took his hand. Then remember this. You were not the one who saved me. I saved myself. You were the one who saw it. Tears welled in his eyes, but didn't fall. I stood slowly, walked to the willow, and placed my palm against its trunk. It had grown stronger than I ever imagined. It no longer wept, it stood. And I, in some way, stood with it. Later that night, I wrote my last entry. If you are reading this, it means I have gone. Not vanished. Just moved. Into memory, into story. Into the breath of this house. Don't mourn. Not for long. Walk the halls. Open the windows. Let laughter in. This house has witnessed many things. Let the next chapter be joy. I signed it. Folded it. Left it beneath the cushion of the armchair where Martin once sat. Then I went to bed. And when the wind passed through the open window and called my name, I let it forget me, because I had finally remembered myself. Here the story ends. Thanks for watching. Hit like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more true and real stories.